One story very few Americans are talking about is Omar Khadr. He is a terrorist who was apprehended in Afghanistan. He murdered Sergeant Chris Spear and blinded in one eye Sergeant Lane Morris. There is video footage of his terrorist activity, and he confessed. So in Guantanamo Bay, he was sentenced to 40 years. Unfortunately, President Barack Obama had secretly facilitated a plea bargain that brought the judgment down to 8 years. He was then transferred to Canada, where he got 5 years, and he's out now. The media is fawning all over him, asking him what he's going to have for dinner, and it gets so depressing you feel like blowing yourself up. But I spoke to KT McFarland, and she is a former assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Reagan. She's a speechwriter with a lot of experience in foreign policy, still very active today. And she actually has some good news about the future of extremist Islam. So, KT, why is Obama so soft on terror?
Well, I'm not going to explain Barack Obama's foreign policy or his terrorist policy, but I do think that there's a certain mindset that says, you know, if you sort of see no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil, somehow there's no evil. And so the inability to say the words Islamic and terrorist in the same sentence has governed their whole foreign policy. Now, they would say the reason they're doing it is because they don't want to get 1.7 billion Muslims mad at them. And if they sort of talk about one group of them, that somehow the entire community of the Islamic community is going to be angry at them, I think is misguided. Why? Because, in fact, the Islamic community itself is starting to reform. We're starting to talk about it. So President Sisi of Egypt, I met with him about 2 months ago, and he had just gone to Al-Azhar University, which is like their Vatican, and he had said to the leaders of the Muslim religion, you guys, we have a big problem, and that's radical Islam. We didn't snuff it when we should have, and it's up to you, and it's your responsibility to speak out. About a month later, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar University, who I also met with a few weeks ago, he went to Mecca, and he said to all the senior educators of Islam, of Sunni Islam, he said, we have to change. We have to reform ourselves. So what we have been waiting for 15 years was within the Muslim community, we've always been saying, where are the modern Muslims? Why don't they speak up? Why don't they condemn the violence? They, in fact, have started to do that. So that's why I think that it's a mistake when the president isn't going to talk about it. He's going to pretend it doesn't exist when, in fact, they're standing up and saying, it does exist. What we should be doing is saying, it's their internal problem, let them deal with it, but we applaud their efforts.
So we're in a situation where the American and Canadian media is placating extremist Islam. The president is actively helping them and making excuses like saying, well, the Crusades were bad, but
or they don't have jobs.
Or they don't have, they just need jobs.
So
but Islam itself is now self-correcting better than the West and actually being more critical of Muslims than we are.
They need to reform it from within. We can't tell them how to do their job.
And you're saying they are doing that.
And now that they have started to step up and to do it at enormous personal risk. I mean, the Grand Imam, when he goes to Mecca and he says, we have a problem with the fanatic sects of Islam, when the president of Egypt says that, they are putting a big X on their backs. They are putting themselves in jeopardy. And the fact that they're doing it, we should say, we applaud what they're doing. We can't tell the Muslim world how to change, but if the Muslim world is trying to change, we should encourage that.
Well, maybe these imams who are trying to make a change, maybe they could talk to President Obama and the American media and try to reform them and make them more moderate.
Well, they're not waiting for the American media and the American president. They're doing their own thing.
They've moved on.
They've moved on. I mean, no, but in reality, President Obama's policy is we're going to lead from behind. Well, you don't lead from behind because you may get away with it for a year or two, but eventually the guys out in front, they're not looking behind for the orders. And the other thing that happens is when you step back from the front, there's a big power vacuum up front, and then others rush to try to fill it. Every speech that the president makes, he talks about we're going to lead from behind, or we're going to have a rules-based society or the global community. He keeps talking about it as if, well, if America only just stepped back a little bit, somehow everyone else would rise to the occasion, and we would all get along because the world community, the rules-based society, and that's not what has happened. If it's the alternative to American leadership is not world governance. The alternative to American leadership is either somebody else rushes in to be the new China, Russia, Iran, even North Korea. They think they're going to be in charge of their neighborhood, or the alternative is chaos.
It's like when I was in prison. There's the main bully in the yard, and you have to go beat up that guy and then take over the prison, or else someone else is going to do it.
Or it's a constant, every day you have to fight the new fight. It's not that America needs to lead from the front in a military sense.
Right.
I mean, I think we've now seen after 15 years after September 11th, we got that lesson, right? We shouldn't get involved militarily in a war that we can't win. But there are so many other ways America can lead, economically, morally, politically, diplomatically. But the problem with negotiating, and when any leader says, well, I want to have a diplomatic solution, negotiating without leverage, that's not negotiating, that's begging.
Right.
So you need to have something to back up your diplomacy, whether it's economic power that you're willing to use, political power that you're willing to exploit. And if it comes to it, as a last resort, maybe you do use military power, but only if you know how to win.